Warmly welcome to the Nobel Prize Museum here in Stockholm. My name is Karin Claesson and I work as a curator here. The Nobel Prize is awarded to people who have done something beneficial for humankind. And the Nobel Prize shows that ideas can change the world. The courage, the persistence and the creativity of Nobel laureates inspires us all to get engaged. One of these Nobel laureates is Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 together with Leymah Gbowee and Tawakkol Karman for their non-violent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf from Liberia has worked throughout her life for democracy, equality and peace. She became the first woman president in Africa, and it will be a great joy and privilege to meet her now. And you are very welcome to join us. So thank you so much, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, for taking your time and doing this. Such a great privilege for us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to do it.
Thank you. And you are sitting in your hometown, Monrovia, and I am sitting in a very cold Stockholm in Sweden. You were born and raised in Monrovia, and for a person like me who have not yet been there, could you just tell us a little bit about Monrovia?
Monrovia is the capital city of Liberia. Today, the population is about 1.3 million, a number that's increased as a result of the years of conflict when people from rural areas fled. Monrovia is on the Atlantic Ocean, and so it's a coastal city. That's good and bad. It's good because you can go to the beautiful beaches and watch the sea. It's bad because as climate change has now reached a level, our seas are getting stronger and higher and are beginning to flood the land. Monrovia, like every other, like the rest of the country and the world, made up largely of young people. Many of them haven't come through our civil wars, having difficulties getting quality education, getting jobs. It's a city that is still being rebuilt after 2 decades of destruction. But the people, particularly the young, are resilient. They've gone through lots of atrocity, not only wars, but Ebola and all of that. And today they're now part of a population that has seen a democratic transition that was peaceful. Now are enjoying some 16 years of peace, consecutive years of peace, and are looking forward to a future of hope. Sunny Monrovia.
And you grew up...
Let me add, sunny Monrovia, but rainy Monrovia. I think we're the rainiest city in the world.
Well, I think Stockholm is on that list as well. You grew up in Monrovia. If you can compare it to the Monrovia you live in today from your own upbringing, how did that look like?
Well, quite different, because Monrovia in my childhood days had not experienced war. And so the progress was slow but progressive. The population was smaller, since the city was made for about 400,000 people. So social services, could be delivered much easier and could reach many more people adequately. That has changed because the population size have increased so tremendously. Um, and so now it's a bit crowded. Now you have many areas of many slum areas in which the population concentration is so heavy that makes it difficult, or if not, to get social services like water and you know um, sanitation services and all of that makes it very difficult. Again, because the population is young, you have a lot of kids now that also do selling on the sidewalks and in the streets, something that did not happen before because, again, of the population explosion. Um,
Yeah.
but it continues to be a place where people continue to carry about their activities. Schools, thank goodness, schools are open again. Kids are in their uniforms, going to school again. So it's like we're in the process of reconstruction and rebirth after 2 decades of war and destruction.
Yeah. Uh, your biography is called This Child Will Be Great. An extraordinary title, I must say. And those words came from an older man when you were nearly newborn, if I have understood it correctly. What is the story behind that?
Well, the story, told by my mother is that after I was born, a few days after I was born, when I was in the bed, just a baby on the bed, and where she was, and as our practice is, old friends, old people come when there's a new birth to greet the baby and thank the mother for the birth. And so this old man came in, and he was allowed to come just into the room and just observe the baby on the bed. And he just made that expression, this child will be great. For us, it didn't mean very much, nor we could fathom, how that would play out in my life. And so, in the days that followed, there was nothing that said his prediction would be true. Nothing whatsoever, because my life was very ordinary. I had all the difficulties like any other young person, any other young child. But as things progressed and I became more activist and became more educated and more vocal in things I did, and so my climb up the ladder of success was a long one. There was no catapulting into leadership into where I am today. It was a question of achieving rung by rung on the ladder, with difficulties, with good times and success and failures, and so it's a long life. But as I begin to evolve into leadership, take on responsibility, hold positions, then you might say that some indication that maybe this prophecy had something to it, had some element of truth to it, and so we progressed until where we are today. And when I decided to get a book written after my first term, presidential term, we timed it for that. So it would come out. So you see that the book ends on my inaugural address, January 2006. When the book went to the publishers, it was their choice, not mine. When I was asked for what title I wanted, my title was Beating the Odds, because I thought I'd gone through a long, hard life to get where I was, and it took a while to beat the odds. But the publishers decided otherwise, because I had talked about this event with the old man, and they decided that was the title of the book that they felt comfortable with. They felt that's the one that was going to I guess, be more attractive, be more acceptable to a reading public.
Well, it is a great title. And in the book, you also write in your biography that one thing I had always believed in was my own potential. I looked around and saw the lives of so many Liberian women, all of these incredibly hard-working market women and housewives and mothers. And what I saw was that their lives were drudgery, a simple trudging from day to day to day. I did not want that. That was not the life for me. So, what did you want at that time?
Frankly, it was more like um, putting that in the context of my grandmothers. Not so much for me. I think my own life was a little bit different. I grew up in a place where I did have the opportunity for schooling and all of that. But putting it in that context of I had two grandmothers that were illiterate, that were in fact farmers and market people. So it's in that context that reflecting on what they were, and they represented what most of the women around, also, you know, uh, also experienced. So it was, I didn't want that, for me. And as a matter of fact, that led to my own commitment to say that when I had the authority, I would do something to better the lives of market women. So that was part of my mantra when I became president.
Was that also a natural way for you into politics?
In a way, because again of my own background, part rural, part part academic, part urban, part poor, part prosperous. It's the kind of a background that I think set the stage for being able to set goals that were beyond what would have been normal for for the background of someone coming from where I was coming from and given what we went through family wise and whatnot. But I think that's what build the character. That's what enabled me to build a kind of determination. But my activists came, like I say, from childhood girls doing the things I did, and then school, taking positions in school, holding positions in school, being a part of school leadership and all of that. I think it's what propelled me to take on more and to set goals that were constantly elevated to be higher and to reach higher levels of leadership. It was a long road.
Yes, of course. And an important part of that road, I guess, was the political nonviolent actions in Liberia from the 90s and onwards that are truly remarkable. Liberian women started to organize to stop war and violence. And this is also an extraordinary example of the power of collaboration and persistence. Can you please tell us something about this movement that actually did lead to ceasefire and eventually peace?
Let me put it in the historical context of the fact that Liberia has always had strong women. Not women in power, not women with authority, but women with position and strength to be noticed and to be paid attention to. Whether it was a woman chief in the rural areas, or whether it was a woman who was the second head of the United Nations General Assembly, or whether it was someone who was a circuit court church who marched in her gowns, to protest injustice. So you had these strong women. And so now coming to the event that you're talking about, at a time when the country was going through the trauma, and things were being destroyed and people were dying and whatnot. These women, as you know, the other Nobel Prize winner, Lima Bowie, was one of those, with other strong women that had a movement and wanted to make sure they had the courage to be able to take on the authority and take on all the warlords, that were in charge at the time, and led the movements. I wasn't here, but I was outside doing part of trying to amass the external political support for this. And so all that effort led everybody to Accra for the peace talks that finally led to the peace agenda that enabled us to come back to Liberia and start the process of peace and a new government.
And in that government and in your work, in your achievements, equality is a key word, and equality in so many aspects, gender equality not the least. Why do you think that equality has been such a key word for you?
Because equality has been missing for women the world over, not just Liberia. It has historical roots. It has religious roots. And that have not enabled women to achieve their full potential and to be granted all the rights and opportunities, in any society. Women have always been looked at as mothers, the ones who take care of children. And yes, we do, and we should, and we do it well. But we also aspire to, because we have the same knowledge and courage and stamina and commitment like anyone else, like the men. So, but the stereotyping we've always faced that as to the role you should play and the role that you've been you've been forced to be, which is subsidiary in the society. So it takes a while to break that. It takes a while to give men the kind of understanding about why equality is so important, why it leads to a better society, why it leads to stronger economies, why they lead, and so, but it's something that we've seen a breakthrough, maybe in the past couple of decades, as women aspire to, and women then with their own self-confidence are beginning to challenge the status quo, to demand more equity in society, because it is the right thing to do. We have half of the world's population. We're entitled to half of the justice and half of the rights and half of the opportunities. It's taking a long time. The pace has been slow for transformation, but we're beginning to see a lot of breakthroughs, and I think we'll see more of it within the next few years. Well, you've been lucky in the Scandinavian countries, in Sweden and Norway. You've been able to adopt systems that have insisted and demanded equality, and then establish leadership with women that sets the example of equality and sets the example of performance and capacity and capabilities. So you've been able to do it. The quota system has helped, and we're seeing how that can be made applicable to other countries and other societies. Each country has to, of course, demand their own regime in accordance with their own specificities. But women have bonded the world over and are networking the world over to ask for equality. And I think COVID-19 and what it has exposed in terms of inequities, not only for women, but inequities for young people, inequities for the disadvantaged and the handicapped. We're all searching now for the response to be able to change the world. I don't know.
I will quote you again. And I think this is connected to your political career specifically. The thing to do if I wanted to be successful according to the terms of success that had long dominated our society was to go with the flow. But I could not do that. Why was it hard to go with the flow?
I faced a situation in which we had earned the peace with women at the forefront of the effort. We're now in authority as the presidency, but had to accept the fact that you had a structure that included many of the same perpetrators of war, because they too had exercised their right to elective office and enjoy the will of their people. But one had to make sure that you put in systems that changed things and brought the equity, but also because the record was clear that if there were no compromises along the way, the return to conflict would be inevitable. It's a question of a balancing act. How do you accommodate, that which did not represent the full quality of what was needed, but at the same time knew that you had to also maintain certain standards and international standards if you were going to change the status quo and introduce the kind of reform that was necessary for the longer term success of the country. It's very difficult. There's no book you could read on how to do that. There's no place you can go and have a guidance sheet to say this is something that you face on a daily basis, depending upon the circumstance that evolves. And one just has to be able to cope with it and to overcome it and to succeed. And I think every woman faces that in one way or the other, particularly women who seek leadership. How do they balance the fact that they don't get the preference for promotion? They don't get equal pay. Simply because those who make those decisions are men who are accustomed to ensuring that men get the preferences.
But I'm thinking of what you just said, that if you have the courage to resist going with the flow and still being in politics as you have been, my guess is always then in a situation where compromising is necessary. There is a fine balance between this agenda of yours and the constant compromising. How do you
There's a compromise. There's
deal
a
with that?
compromise between compromising and capitulate. That's where the fine line is. You can't compromise too much or you lose the battle. There are times when hard decisions have to prevail, and you have to take those decisions that make you unpopular because you're not prepared to compromise on certain things.
And this has been dangerous for you as well.
Oh, yeah.
You have been imprisoned, you have been sentenced to death, you have been in exile several times. Are you ever afraid?
No. Concerned, anxious sometimes. But if you let fear overtake you, then you don't do what you need to do for survival and success.
After a brutal period of civil war in Liberia and after Charles Taylor's regime, you ran for president in 2005 and you were inaugurated in 2006, January, as the first woman president in Liberia, but also in Africa. How do you remember that inauguration day?
Oh, it was a great day. I mean, crowds were hilarious. I had people come from all over the world to be a part of that inauguration. It was, after all, a major event as the first woman democratically elected. And so, and even though our infrastructure was in bad shape, you know, taking the roads from our airport to the event of the inauguration were all difficult for people, but people came. African leaders came. Leaders from Europe, the United States, China, and all, they all were here. So, you know, it was just a great event. I think perhaps one of the biggest things for me perhaps was that, you know, once I had taken the oath and we left, I decided to walk on the streets. So I got out of the vehicle and walked, and the crowds followed, walking with me. So I think that was exceptional, and that was memorable.
I can imagine that. One of your first priorities was to put women in key positions in your administration. What was it exactly that you wanted to achieve with this?
To break the status quo. I always said that I wish I were in a position to have made an all-women cabinet. I didn't succeed in that because I didn't have sufficient women in the areas, you know, that required a certain expertise. And so what I did then was to identify those areas that are normally male dominated, you know, or male appointed, like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, you know, Ministry of Commerce, all the big places where women are, people are not accustomed to seeing a woman in charge in those positions. They're really accustomed to see a woman in the social services, education, health, you know, gender, but putting women in those ones set the tone that it was different, that it didn't matter, you know, whether you were a man or woman, that a woman could fit anywhere if she possessed the qualities. Also, I think what we did with the Supreme Court, what we did with being able to put women in positions like in rural administrative positions like mayors, you know, breaking the tattoo that, you know, women could not become what we call paramount chief, which is the head chief in rural areas or in traditional society. Breaking that taboo and making sure they are put there just sent the signal for equality. There's not enough of it to say you achieve that equity right away, but you put in place a process that over time would ensure that equity prevailed.
And this putting women in leadership positions, that obviously, as you say, that means that girls needs to be able to go to school. And this is, of course, a global problem. How do you look upon the education system in your own country, but also globally for young girls today?
Well, in our society and societies that also have traditional systems, normally the girls don't get the opportunity. Girls go with their mothers to the farm. Girls go with their mother to markets. And even when through laws or affirmative action, girls get an education, because in our societies, families are poor. The girl, even if she gets to a certain level, retention in school becomes a major problem, whether it's through early pregnancy or some of our customary habits that keep women from going further. We were able in Liberia to make primary education free. That enabled parents to send more kids to school, because they could go to public schools without paying. Ensuring that we had in rural administrative offices women, where they could see, young girls could see, and really just beginning to communicate with people, to change the laws, to encourage people, and also the symbol of myself, of what was possible itself, had a motivating effect on the women about the potential of their daughters, and even on fathers about the potential of their daughters. And so we were able. We almost reached a parity between girls and boys, for up to the primary level. We reached parity on that. So we knew that the message was getting through. Girls were going to school, were getting out of the markets, out of the marketplace. And in places where we built markets for the women, we established places where, while the mothers were doing their trade, the young girls who had they carried could go to school in the same place, where it's a place where they could be learned. The young kids, like childhood could be taught while their mothers were in markets doing business.
Yeah, it needs to be practical.
Yeah.
Your career is an amazing one, and you have accomplished a lot, but I guess there are failures as well down the road. How do you deal with failures?
I always say failure is the flip side of success. If you don't know failure, you can't appreciate success, because the failure enables you to go through what you did, judge yourself, find out what it is, and you come back stronger, more competitive, more capacity to achieve your goal.
What would you say have been the main challenges in your work?
The most difficult was to be taken for what you are and what you were. There's always that look of doubt and suspicion, if you're in a male-dominated society, as to whether you're up to it. So you have to overcome that with a certain amount of firmness, or sometimes even aggressiveness, we call it, but that's part of it. But in practical terms, in a Liberian context, one of the most difficult things for me was the rape issue for young girls. Something that we fought so hard to overcome, and it's still a problem today. I mean, we made rape an unbailable defense, which meant rape, anybody accused of rape could go straight to prison. But we still fell short of succeeding because compromises were made. Gathering the evidence for that is always difficult. So those are some of the real challenges that we face in society. Of course, if you may say, the challenge of just being able to achieve your goals in the lack of deficiency in resources and capacity. You can dream big, but to achieve it, one has to have the wherewithal to do it. So you're always struggling to make sure that you're able to achieve it. You can find the means to do it. You can get what it requires to get it done. So for those in poor countries, the very issue of poverty is a major challenge. No matter how well endowed. And I believe in these latter years, our greatest challenge is the challenge of youth. Even if we have educational systems, how do they get the jobs once they've graduated? Big challenges for any leader. Definitely in Africa, but I suppose in most other places as well.
You have been active and an activist for a long time. What have your experiences taught you about human nature?
Human, first of all, have a sense of self-protection. That's basic survival. And I think humans like to all want to excel and sometimes are prepared to do whatever it takes to excel. But human nature is also one of friendship. One of love. I mean, the friendships that we create in the world comes from that. Sometimes the force of survival will bring interruptions in friendship. Sometimes the competitiveness of nature will also lead to situations. And we also have a tendency, human nature is also to get angry if there's an offense or if there's self-protection, and that can lead to disruptions in society. And I think if we can give women an extra sensitivity, women demonstrate empathy much more. Empathy of consideration for others, consideration for life, consideration for humankind comes more readily to women, maybe because we're mothers.
And do you think that can be taught? Can you actually kind of train compassion and empathy?
No, I think it comes naturally, but circumstances can move one away from that. because there is what is perceived to be a greater goal. So you can have women leaders who can take some very difficult positions that may even involve injuring life. But is that move away because of the circumstance that presents itself that I think would lead to that?
Just to mention that you have the last year been co-chair at the World Health Organization's Independent Panel for Pandemics Preparedness and Response. What does this engagement mean?
We've been tasked to find out what happened. Why was the world unprepared for this pandemic? How did it happen? What are the processes that went wrong? What impact does it have on the world today? And perhaps more importantly, how can we come up with evidence-based suggestions as to how you can be prepared to ensure that it doesn't happen again? And so our approach is, first of all, to look at the past. I mean, we've had pandemics before, but COVID-19, of course, as they call it, SARS-2, has been more intense, greater reach than any. So how do we look at the past, first of all, of previous pandemics and what conditions prevailed, and now the present? How do things change that made it happen? And like I say, the big part is how strong are going to be the impact, not only in terms of health, but in terms of the economy, social welfare, equity. What will that impact be? We hope that our recommendations will be bold, and then we go look at the international system. That's part of it. What has happened with the international system? How had the system reacted to all of this? Did we have an international system that itself had the equity, the balance, the knowledge, the interconnectivity, particularly in the midst of what's now is a technological? What happened? Our work will take into account studies that have been done, epidemiology work that has been done by doctors. The chronological events will be discovered, will be examined. The international institutions that have responsibility, like those in the UN system, the ones that are sort of a brand of private sector, like Gavi and Global Fund and all of those, all will be looked at to see what role they play. Scholars are being asked to bring papers and write papers on certain aspects to get the evidence that's involved. And more importantly, this time we want to reach people. How has it affected people in their daily lives? And so there'll be meetings that will be going on with people in communities, with rural health workers, with some of the health workers who always are not noticed, not the doctors who are specialized, but the nurses and the midwives and the paramedics, all of those who are on the front line and who get affected first. And of course, finally, we will talk about vaccine. Is that the panacea? Is that the most effective way of prevention? Or are there other things we need to do? Do we need to change minds, habits, laws? But it has a lot of experienced people are all putting together the thoughts to try and get a good report, a report that would be bold in its recommendation, and will depart from the status quo of the many reports that groups write that go on a shelf.
We look forward to that one. One last question. I watched a documentary about Liberia the other day, and in that film, recorded a couple of years ago, there was a woman that talked to random people at a market. And she asked a little girl in Monrovia, 11 years old, what she wanted to become. And the girl, she answered that she wanted to be the president. So, speaking of legacy also, what would your advice be to that little girl?
Get all the knowledge you can get. Go to school. Get as much schooling as you can to prepare yourself for it. Be confident in what you want and what you want to be, and stand up for it. And as you grow older, set the goals. Decide what you want to be, and be prepared to pursue it, and stay the course. And don't be afraid of obstacles. You can overcome it. Just believe in yourself and believe in what you want to be, and be prepared to go for it.
Great advice to us all. Thank you so much, Madam President. It was a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, and enjoy your weekend. Have fun.